Thank you for joining me on the Bold Lines podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about how to make effective changes. Especially around this time of year, people start to think about what is it that they would like to see different in their lives. The New Year's resolutions are around the corner. Let's talk about why they work and why they don't, and what you can actually do to make long-lasting changes. I'll start off by saying I absolutely hate New Year's resolutions. I think it's a little annoying, although I get the point. But most of them don't work, and I believe that there's good reasons why they don't work. True change isn't just about small steps that people make. The version of change that I'm going to be talking about today can relate to small or larger issues. These steps of change are obviously relevant during this time of year, but I hope that as you listen to this episode, you start to consider how changing things in these 4 steps I will give you can make a greater impact. So I am going to first outline our steps of change, and then we'll see how it might apply. So what are these steps? I'm going to go in order, and we'll see where some issues arise almost immediately. In order to explain this well, I'm going to be using the metaphor of a stomachache. I want you to consider the feeling of an upset stomach. As you're sitting in your car or in your chair or wherever you are, think back to the times when your stomach has felt off or odd. Now, we can feel these feelings. Sometimes they're physical and emotional, and there are quite different interventions to deal with them. The first step in order to deal with our stomachache is to notice, what is it that you are feeling? Where in your stomach are you having pain? Is the pain persistent or sporadic? Or is it even pain at all? Maybe it's discomfort. Maybe it feels like a rock in your stomach. What is it that you immediately notice? The second step is to identify what is actually happening. Is it an anxiety response, or is there a physical issue? Are you verging towards a panic attack? Are you dealing with medication issues? Do you have something like irritable bowel syndrome? Is this feeling something you have felt before? Is it common? Is it rare? Is this something that causes you panic or just frustration? Another good question to ask is, do you know someone else who has felt a similar feeling? Can you describe it and have someone else be able to relate? The third step is to identify meaning. Is this coming from you? Is it coming from your behavior? Or is this something entirely new that you weren't aware of? What could be affecting your sense of anxiety if that is the case? Is your stomach upset because you eat unhealthy food? Or are you experiencing something as severe as appendicitis? Finally, our step 4, action. This step has to do with what you actually do to follow through and make a difference. We're going to park here for a second so we can identify why going through all of these steps is really, really important. This action step should guide us to whatever intervention actually applies. Do you need Pepto-Bismol? Do you need deep breathing exercises? Or do you need an ER visit? There are drastically different implications for all of them. If you pick the wrong one, though, you can either die or overdo the fix and create a greater sense of shame and anxiety. Let's first consider the stomachache and what our possible actions could be. Let's say that we misidentify what's happening. You have a stomachache and you go to the ER and you overblow it. You just completely exaggerate what's happening. Well, you've created medical bills and needless amounts of time. Let's say you try deep breathing and you might feel a little bit better, but not a lot has changed. Let's say that you are having problems with anxiety, nearing a panic attack. Well, if you take Pepto-Bismol, it may work because of a placebo effect. Deep breathing will certainly help. And if you go to the ER, there's probably a sense of shame, realizing that, well, all you had to do was breathe a little bit. Finally, let's go to appendicitis. What happens if you try Pepto-Bismol? Nothing. What happens if you use deep breathing? Nothing. What happens if you go to the ER? You can possibly avoid sepsis. Our actions need to be reasonable and directed at what is actually happening. We should address the issues we face specifically, not just in an overall sense. So let's go to why New Year's resolutions fail, and we can get into a little bit of the psychology around them and figure out what we might be able to do to improve our own resolutions. Let me go over the 4 steps and where the fatal flaw is. The 4 steps are to notice what is happening, to identify potential causes, recognize the meaning of why these symptoms have shown up, and to take action to help intervene and make changes. Most people go through steps 1 to step 2, they skip step 3, and move to step 4. They notice, identify, skip meaning, and jump straight to action. Let's use one of the most common New Year's resolutions as an example. Weight loss is usually around the top of the pile when it comes to New Year's resolutions. It's something that I've even heard in therapy every once in a little while. It's something that I have seen as I was in a more exercise positive area of my life. Having kids and other responsibilities makes that a little more difficult. But let's go to noticing. When people consider a New Year's resolution of weight loss, they will notice that their clothing doesn't quite fit as it usually did. Now, sure, dryers can sometimes shrink clothes. But if we're honest with ourselves, it only shrinks so much. People also remember that they used to be able to do more things or access more spaces. And so they'll start to notice that things are different. They feel different. Maybe it's their energy level. Maybe it's the clothes they fit into. Maybe it's just how they overall feel. Then people move into identifying. People begin to realize that their unhealthy eating patterns and their lack of exercise or active activity caused weight gain. When they see that exercise has gone down or they come to recognize it, they can start to feel a sense of urgency. They can say, oh my goodness, I used to go this many times a week, or I used to be able to do this, and now I can't. Or some people say, well, the dryer really didn't shrink this as much as I tell myself. I can actually make a change. One of the most obvious ways that people notice this difference tends to be in old pictures. People can look back on memories of their phone or social media and realize that they look a little bit different. They can also compare themselves to other people. If that's friends, if that's groups they've been around, they can start to wonder, why is it that I look different? So they have noticed, they have identified. The problem is, they jump straight to action, and we're going to talk about why that is such a big deal. Jumping straight to action is a huge problem, much like the incorrect interventions that I spoke about earlier when dealing with an upset stomach. And so people will identify that they've gained weight or they've become more unhealthy, their body is less exercised, so they'll pick up a new workout routine out of nowhere. Instead of recognizing why they have gained the weight or they have become less healthy in their aerobic exercise, they just say, I must fix it. I mentioned earlier that I used to exercise way more often, and maybe this is something I'll pick up when I have more time, but I used to go to a rock climbing gym fairly often, usually multiple times a week. It was great for me because it was an exercise I actually enjoyed. Didn't feel like I was slugging myself there. Anyway, over the years, I started to notice a trend. The New Year's resolutions would kick in, and people would show up in huge numbers in January. The numbers would dwindle in February and be back to normal by March. This was so predictable that I started to wonder how often I should even go at the beginning of the year because so many routes and so many opportunities were taken up. Now, I didn't disparage anyone who was trying a new thing. Go for it. I enjoyed it a lot, and other people should be given the opportunity as well. But you could almost run a clock by it. People would show up with a newfound hope they could do something different, and by March, everything was back to the same. Without understanding why someone has gained weight, they may continue the cycle of shame and unhealthy behavior. If someone is working out, or let's say going to a climbing gym to avoid poor self-image, they won't get the results they're looking for. Sometimes these resolutions for higher amounts of exercise are just performative. It can be a way to lie to ourselves about what we're able to achieve or where we've actually ended up. Without an internal emotional change, it's just pure motivation, not determination. Let me talk about the difference real quick between the two. Motivation is the amount of emotional energy you feel in the morning and throughout the day. It's variable, and it's susceptible to changes in your environment. Determination is different. Determination is a dedication toward change, no matter what you're feeling. Most often, determination is the most successful when people make incremental changes to their lives. And so, no matter what they're feeling, no matter what's going on, they go and do the thing. And since so many people have jumped straight to action and skipped meaning in their New Year's resolutions, they ultimately fail. Interestingly enough, I can't remember where I saw this, but most weight loss plans fail. And it doesn't have anything to do with math or understanding healthy eating patterns. I live in the United States, and people are well aware that there are healthy and unhealthy foods. It's not due to a lack of education. But since most people have not identified any sense of meaning in why they've gained weight, they're doomed to repeat this cycle over and over and over again. So what would actually make a change if someone were to go after this high-level New Year's resolution? Go back to meaning. If we were to continue on this weight loss discussion, it is important to address meaning because if emotional issues are addressed, weight loss is just a math problem with some complexities. This might sound like an oversimplification, but follow me for a second. Everyone knows that there's certain amounts of nutrition that affect people's weight loss, weight gain, energy, all of those things. Of course, there are health issues or concerns. Of course, there are things that people can do and cannot do. However, if we were to address all of the emotional variables, weight loss is mostly just math. People can argue if it's calories and sugar, whatever it is. But if you eat less, exercise more, cut out unhealthy things, or lower them down to a significant degree, you will see results. So for something so simple, why is it such a problem? I'll give you a few reasons. And these are just some that I've thought about in my own life or seen around me, as well as some things that I've seen in therapy. So why do people overeat or eat unhealthy foods excessively? Sometimes it's out of habit. It's just what they always do. They don't think about it that much. It's just what happens. Some people continue in unhealthy patterns because of what they buy. They don't really give themselves the opportunity to eat healthier. They go to the store hungry, and then they just buy things that they think would make good snacks. And so they don't have the opportunity to eat better. Another reason has to do with adjusted taste. If someone is used to high levels of sugar in their diet, they will not find low sugar foods to taste all that good. And so that process might take some time to actually adjust, and people might need to eat foods that they think taste bland for a little while for their palate to change. Another reason people eat unhealthy foods to an excessive degree has to do with cultural or family traditions. This can be due to where families came from or the situation they grew up in. It's very common to hear things like, well, in my home, you ate everything on your plate. Or, where I come from, it's polite to eat what's in front of you. So, some of the problems with food and overeating comes from how someone was raised. One of the deeper, I would say, more poignant reasons in therapy people overeat is an attempt to self-soothe. If life isn't going so great, eating certain foods can make you feel better, at least for a short period of time. There are some people who have problems with eating due to trauma responses. Sometimes people overeat as a way to cope from overwhelming feelings, or if they've had a lack of food in the past, they can be stuck with this scarcity mentality and always eat as much as they can due to this internal fear that they won't have food again. The last big reason I'm going to mention here is a divorce from any other meaningful coping or processing skills. It becomes very easy to use overeating as a crutch when you've not given yourself any other way to deal with emotional issues. Of course you're going to overeat. You don't know how to calm down otherwise, so the cycle will continue. I'll also mention food and meals can easily carry meaning past what they literally are. Some people will pick up their favorite meals, or this food that reminds them of a certain period of their lives. So even if people are making decent choices, sometimes there can be this attached meaning that people don't realize. So if we're going into the meaning of why people overeat or excessively eat unhealthy foods, it's important to consider, why does something need to be changed? Let's take a sense of vanity out of it. Why does change even need to happen? Is it because of your own health? Do you consider if you would want to spend extra time with grandchildren or have the ability to run around with them? Does it have to do with a sense of comfort? Does it have to do with the way that we interact with others or are seen socially? Most importantly, especially since this podcast has to do with therapy, I would want you to consider, what purpose has this thing served you to keep up this unhealthy behavior? Even outside of weight loss as a New Year's resolution, it's important to consider what purpose this unhealthy behavior has served you to keep it up for so long. Even something like impulsive spending. While it might seem dumb and credit card debt can rise, if you don't address why it's an issue in the first place and what it has done for you to be able to spend excessively, you won't ever be able to make the change, or your unhealthy coping will migrate into another area of your life. So what do we do now? I've told you that New Year's resolutions suck. They're not that helpful, and you need to make meaningful steps towards change. If you're going to make a change, be sure you're addressing the correct issue. Don't come into therapy with appendicitis and beg for Pepto-Bismol. One, I can't prescribe medication, even if it's over the counter, but more importantly, it doesn't do anything to fix it. A lot of people come to therapy for even years, wondering why their appendicitis has gone septic, and explaining to me, well, I've been taking Pepto all of this time, and I still feel bad. You should see what interventions are actually beneficial for you. But especially, you should consider the ones that are sustainable. I gave a little hint to this earlier in the episode when I talked about rock climbing. I have tried many different ways of exercising, running, going to a gym, a whole bunch of different things, but rock climbing was the most beneficial for me because the best exercise, the best routine is not what is the perfect set of steps. It is what you will actually do. And so I learned it's better for me to work out than to run. Because while running might have superior benefits in some ways, I won't actually do it. And so I'd rather work out instead. And I would suggest something like that to you. It is more effective to do something you're willing to do instead of something you would force yourself to do. So, go rock climb, as it were. If your New Year's resolution or hope for change has to do with food or eating, don't jump to all vegetables. Make small incremental changes that you can actually do. Or make changes that make sense first. Start with ways that you can truly cut down, shift, or change without bringing on a sense of shame. If these hopeful changes are exciting or encouraging, you'll probably do them. So these are the things that I recommend. Whatever your New Year's resolution is, take time to weigh the implications of change and make small steps. If you were to acknowledge that overeating has to do with self-soothing and you have no other meaningful skills to self-soothe, you might want to consider mastery in other skills before you address weight loss. Why? Because you won't be able to regulate yourself. You won't be able to make sense of the world unless you can actually calm down and process. This is why meaning is so important when making effective change. So I'm going to give one last review of our 4 steps to close out this episode. The first thing that you're going to want to do in your true New Year's resolution is to notice what's happening. Pay attention to signs and symptoms. Next, you identify the specific mechanisms that are causing these issues in your life. Then, and I believe this is the most important step, acknowledge meaning. Why these things have come into your life, how they have been sustained and what's kept you from changing them. And then finally, you take effective action. And you engage in small steps along the way that can be sustainable, that are uncomfortable, but not so egregious that you no longer want to engage at all. Thank you so much for listening today. This was a fun topic to talk about. Anytime I can be a little argumentative, I'll take that action. If you found it beneficial, I hope you share this episode with someone else, and you can follow the podcast, download all of the episodes. Thank you so much. Keep walking towards healing, and have a great day.